Completion and defects are crucial aspects of construction projects that often lead to disputes and legal challenges. This essay delves into the topic of completion and defects, examining the issues that arise when determining completion, the implications of different certification processes, and the disputes that may arise regarding completion. Additionally, the essay explores the concept of defects, the standard of performance required, and the calculation of damages in cases involving defects. Ordinarily, completion is confirmed by the superintendent issuing a certificate of practical completion. This certificate is typically issued when the works are able to be used for their intended purpose, even if minor defects may still exist. The issuance of the certificate marks the commencement of the defect liability period, during which the builder is responsible for rectifying any defects. However, a question arises when major defects exist that affect the intended purpose of the works. In such cases, the issuance of the certificate of practical completion may be questionable. One issue with the superintendent issuing the certificate of practical completion, as opposed to a certifier issuing a occupation certificate, is the potential lack of expertise and objectivity. The superintendent is often associated with the employer or principal, which may lead to bias. On the other hand, a certifier is typically an independent authority responsible for ensuring compliance with relevant regulations and standards. The involvement of a certifier may provide greater assurance regarding the completion and compliance of the works. Uzok and Henley Properties New South Wales Proprietary Limited 2007 NSWC A31 is an important case in Australian contract law as it reinforces the principle that a buyer is entitled to receive the property in accordance with the agreed specifications. This case highlights the importance of fulfilling contractual obligations and the rights of buyers to seek remedies for breaches of contract in relation to property transactions. Disputes regarding completion can and do occur, and within this case, the builder issued a certificate of practical completion despite certain appliances not being installed. The court held that the builder's argument of industry practice to install the appliances on the day of handover did not in fact constitute an implied term. This case highlights the potential for disputes arising from discrepancies between the express terms of the contract and industry practices. Some contracts include provisions for deemed completion, where the certificate of practical completion is deemed to be issued if the superintendent fails to issue it within a reasonable time. Additionally, staged practical completion may be employed in contracts, allowing for partial completion and occupation of certain sections while other works continue. These provisions aim to address delays in certification and accommodate complex projects. The defect liability period is a crucial period in the contract, typically lasting 12 months after practical completion. During this period, the builder is liable for rectifying any defects that arise. While statutory warranty periods may extend beyond the defect liability period, it remains an important phase for addressing defects within the contractual framework. The standard of performance required for construction works is typically strict, as the product delivered should meet the intended purpose. If the contract is silent, it is usually interpreted as requiring strict performance. However, achieving absolute perfection is not expected, but rather meeting a requisite standard. Damages for defects are calculated based on either the cost of rectification or the difference in value between the property with the defect and without it. The court's choice between these approaches depends on reasonableness and proportionality. In some cases, courts have departed from the prima facie rectification approach when calculating damages for defects. The Belgrove and Eldridge case established the prima facie approach of awarding damages reflective of the cost of rectifying the defect. However, such cases as Jacob and Youngs and Kent 1921 230 and Y239 and Ruxley Electronics and Construction Co. Limited and Forsyth 1996 AC 344 have highlighted the complex nature of completion and defects in construction contracts. In the case of Jacob and Youngs and Kent, the court considered a situation where the homeowner discovered that the contractor had installed the wrong brand of pipes, but the pipes were of equal quality and value. The court held that even though there was a technical breach of contract, the homeowner was not entitled to damages because they had received the substantial performance of the contract. This case established the principle of substantial performance, which means that if a contractor has substantially performed their contractual obligations, minor defects or deviations may not necessarily entitle the client to refuse payment or claim damages. Instead, the client may be limited to a claim for the cost of rectifying the defects. On the other hand, the Ruxley Electronics case dealt with a different aspect of defects in construction. In this case, the claimant had contracted with the defendant to build a swimming pool. The contract specified that the pool would have a depth of 7 feet and 6 inches. However, due to an error by the contractor, the pool was constructed with a depth of only 6 feet. The claimant sought damages for the cost of rebuilding the pool to the correct depth. The House of Lords held that the cost of rectification could only be awarded if it was reasonable for the claimant to rebuild the pool. In this case, the court determined that the discrepancy in depth did not significantly affect the value or use of the pool, and therefore it was not reasonable to award the cost of rebuilding. Instead, the claimant was awarded nominal damages for the breach of contract. These cases demonstrate that the approach to defects in completion can vary depending on the specific circumstances and the impact of the defects on the overall performance or value of the completed work. Courts often consider factors such as the nature and extent of the defect, the purpose of the contract, and the reasonableness of the rectification measures. Completion and defects in construction projects are complex issues that require careful consideration. While the concept of substantial performance allows for minor defects to be rectified rather than entitling the client to refuse payment or claim damages, the extent and impact of the defects play a significant role in determining the appropriate remedies. Each case is assessed on its own merits, taking into account various factors to arrive at a fair resolution.